Voice of the Sea, learning from experts across the ocean.
Welcome to Voice of the Sea.
In this episode, we're looking at the science and policy of setback regulations for building near our coastlines. As sea level rise and coastal erosion cause homes, hotels, and condos to fall into the sea, our communities are facing tough questions about how to preserve property and the natural coastal environment. Kauai County Planner Ka'aina Hull and Hawaii Sea Grant coastal land use expert Ruby Pop work together in a unique partnership to respond to coastal erosion and sand movement, as well as rising seas and storm flooding. We start out with Ruby in her office to see how aerial photos and data are used to create long-term projections of shoreline change.
Can you tell me a little bit about Hawaii Sea Grant and why they have a partnership with the county?
Sea Grant is actually a national organization that's located in all of our coastal universities. There's a lot of different programs with Sea Grant too. On Oahu, we have the Hanauma Bay Educational Program. There's a lot of cool things going on. Sea Grant, through that role in the universities, provides extension services to communities. So that means we're in the university, we're not just teaching classes, but we're actually going out into the community and providing technical assistance and advice on ocean and coastal resources issues and a variety of topics, from fisheries to aquaculture to coastal hazards, which I'm most involved with. I actually am a planner by background. I rely a lot on scientists in the university and then also in the private sector too. There's some good scientists. I see my role as kind of acting as a liaison between that scientific information and how to translate that into policy or just using that information in day-to-day decisions on the ground. We have, for example, here, they created erosion rate maps, which greatly assist local government in where to allow new structures to be built. If it's a developer, they have to get permits from the local government. They use this information to decide where the safest place to build is.
Very cool.
Yes.
And can you tell me a little bit about this data that you pulled up on the screen?
Yeah, so this is just an example from Anahola, but we actually have maps. Actually, go back here. We have shoreline erosion maps, shoreline erosion maps for the entire sandy coastline of our islands. It doesn't exist for rocky coastlines because they were looking at beaches, beach erosion. So if we want to go to Anahola, here I clicked on that and we cut to this map. And we can zoom in to an area. So see, it says shoreline change rate here. So this is a bar graph that's basically depicting the calculated shoreline change rate for a particular area of the shoreline. And these transects, these yellow lines that are perpendicular to the coastline are each transect that the researchers used to calculate the erosion rate that is depicted out here on the bar graph.
These colored lines actually refer to each one of those points in time that they had an aerial photograph.
Yes.
And the blue one out here, that's the oldest photograph?
Let's look at the blue one. What year was that? Because they fluctuate, shorelines fluctuate over time. That's why they're all over the place. But yeah, the blue one was 1927. In 1927, at this area of the coastline at Aliomano Beach, for example, the toe of the beach was all the way out to this blue line. Now you can see that it's retreated back to here.
Oh, but over here on the headland, it's kind of crossing up and changing a bit more in terms of...
Sure, yeah. Because sand moves around over time. Sometimes, you have episodal beach loss, so a big erosion event, perhaps. There's a big storm or something, and you'll lose sand, but then the beach might recover within a few years. So this is important to remember that this is a long-term data set. So the resulting erosion rate number that you get is calculated over a century. Currently, the formula for setbacks is you take this erosion rate you multiply it by a factor of 70, and then you add 60 feet on top of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how many feet then would somebody be, say, looking to, if you're building a home?
It depends on the erosion rate. Oh, you're gonna make me do math.
Well, say it's losing 1 foot
Let's
per year.
use the whiteboard. Can we do that? So if you have 1 foot per year, feet per year, you would take 1, multiply by 70, and then you add 60. It used to be 40 feet, and then they added 20 to account for that sea level rise. So this is the current formula. 70, why 70, you might ask? 70 is the expected lifespan of a home on the coast.
Okay.
So if you use that, then in theory that you have, that home is safe for its expected economic life, 70 years. So 1 times 70 plus 60 equals, anyone good at math?
130.
130 feet. So that would be your setback.
The University of Hawaii's Sea Grant College program focused on Hawaii's coasts and its communities through sustainable development, safe seafood supply, sustainable coastal tourism, hazard resilience, and healthy coastal ecosystems. Hawaii's Sea Grant.
Exploring Our Fluid Earth is the dynamic curriculum developed by the University of Hawaii's Curriculum Research and Development Group. The award-winning Fluid Earth and Living Ocean textbooks are now interactive and online. New activities, updated content, and a teacher community. Exploring Our Fluid Earth is now freely available. Find out more at exploringourfluidearth.org. We're on the east side of Kauai with Sea Grant coastal land use expert Ruby Pop to look at erosion problems.
Ruby, tell me what's going on here.
We're in Waipoli, Kapa'a town, a rapidly changing coastline in terms of the beaches here. Every time I come out here, it's changed. So as you can see, this is just the impact of the erosion that you can see further down the coast here, and they've put in some temporary sandbags there, and this appears to be where they're building their protection right now. So this is an area of coastline that was developed some years ago, pre-setback days, before they were thinking too much about that. So you can see a lot of development close to the shoreline and is threatened by coastal erosion. And here's one property in particular that has experienced the brunt of that this winter due to strong trade winds. They experienced accelerated erosion, as you can see down here, with a lot of the roots exposed, came very close to the building here. And so they have, as an emergency measure, gone in and put in a sandbag wall to protect the structure while they go over their more long-term options for the area. This is a neighborhood that's not unlike many other places in Hawaii where it's very developed. Mm-hmm. And this is the type of situation that's constantly being spoken about by planners and property owners is what can we do in our community to respond to the inevitable rising seas and erosion and flooding that's happening. And so a real planning conundrum here, what the long-term options are for this neighborhood and this property, and individual property owners are nervous, and understandably so.
So tell me about where we're at and what's going on.
So yeah, we're in Aliamano area. This is Aliamano Bay. And what I wanted to show you today was just the pattern of development that you can see around here. Obviously, Very different from where we just were. A lot of large single-family homes, some of them located closer to the shoreline than others. And what I wanted to show you today was one that's under construction actually now under the new setback rules, the 70 times the erosion rate plus 60, which includes 20 feet for sea level rise.
Great. Let's take a look.
This home is under construction. It has a 140-foot setback from the certified shoreline, and that was based on an approximate rate of erosion of 1 foot per year. You'll notice that this home is also elevated, so it's out of the flood zone too. So they got lucky with the topography. Actually, what they were sharing with me is that this had been filled in by a previous contractor years ago, so it's a sort of an artificial hill that has brought them outside the flood zone. If you look next door, the home was also recently constructed, but it's a little bit closer to the shoreline. It's a really great illustration because that one used the erosion rates, so it's a pretty good setback based on the historical erosion rates, but it was before the time when they had added the additional 20 feet for sea level rise. So we have still a pretty good setback there at 110 feet. They should be pretty safe for a good long while there, as compared to, let's say, this home here, which is obviously a lot.
Oh my gosh.
A lot closer to the shoreline. So they may be starting to think about what their options are.
It's just like striking. I mean, it's so big. In 100 years, what we're predicting is that the ocean level will be at the foot of that berm.
Yeah, in theory, in 70 years, well, let's see, 70 times, approximately that amount of time, we would have erosion that is, reaching that structure.
The Curriculum Research and Development Group in the College of Education at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. CRDG's training roots go back over 40 years. Through professional development programs, curriculum workshops, research on teaching methodology, individualized school and district training, and so much more. The Curriculum Research and Development Group, improving schools, improving education. CRDG.
We're talking with Ka'aina Hall in the Kauai Planning Department about the work they're doing to provide new homes for residents and the growing keiki population while still protecting the aina.
If there's one thing that I want to let the public know and the role that the planning department plays here in Kauai and throughout the state in their various facets, ultimately the planning department is here to steer the growth of the built environment, so to speak, or ensure that the built environment doesn't occur in certain places. It is here to preserve the rural and open and coastal areas of the island that so much of our citizens feel is part of who we are as an island. The department in its policy proposals is saying, but we as an island are growing. We have to look at the fact that Kauai has a 0.9 to 1.1% annual growth. It fluctuates, but over the years, the trend is annual growth of about 1 to 1.1%. Now, a lot of the immediate knee-jerk response to that is, well, that's all the mainlanders from California moving over here, the snowbirders, they're taking over and we need to stop them, so stop building for them, stop the growth accommodation. But when we peel back the numbers, actually, it gives a very different picture. You're looking at approximately about 150 to 250 individuals from the mainland moving to Kauai, and versus our actual natural birth rate, which fluctuates anywhere between 11 to 1,200 children being born annually on this island. And then you match that with our actual death rate, which is a little morbid to look at, but in long-range planning, you have to look at the death rate and how you're going to account for that. We have a death rate of about 800 to 900 a year. And so our own natural birth rate is outpacing our death rate, meaning if we do not accommodate for this growth, the message that the county has to take is to the keiki, one day you have to move off the island. Because we will not build the houses for you to live in or the jobs for you to work at. So the plan is attempting to accommodate that growth. And how we accommodate that growth essentially is is looking at infill development and further making our towns that much more denser in order to, one, accommodate the growth, as well as two, preserve the rural and open environment that so much of Kauai cherishes, because that's the demands we get, are preserve Kauai's rural character, preserve its open space, preserve its coastal areas, but make more jobs, make more houses. And the only way we can do that then is if we look at further making our towns that much more dense.
Making where people are already living, like Lihue or Kapa'a, and putting houses closer together there so that we can still have these open spaces where people
Correct.
to enjoy nature.
Exactly. That is the proposals we have on the table right now.
So today I'm really interested in trying to understand how scientists' data about sea level rise is influencing planning for the county.
It's influenced it a fair amount in the past few years, in particular with the adoption of our shoreline setback ordinance, which to many experts in the field is one of the most robust shoreline setback ordinances around the country. And we took scientific data in particular for the erosion rates, or the coastal erosion rates of Kauai, and we're able to establish a policy for the building of structures in the coastal area to be set back a certain distance from the shoreline based on that erosion data. Now, setbacks are generally a line that you draw on a property that says you can build no closer to the property line than X amount on a setback. And side setbacks and rear setbacks and front setbacks are relatively easy to establish. It's 10 feet, it's 5 feet. Now, for properties that are adjacent to the shoreline, because the property line moves here in Hawaii with the shoreline, it becomes a little bit more complicated because now your setback becomes dynamic. As opposed to your fixed property line, you have it set from, because that shoreline is moving depending on erosion rates, depending on different, say even tides on a certain day, it will determine on how far that front line is to the shoreline. So in order to protect essentially buildings from coastal erosion processes, or protect the coastal erosion processes from the buildings themselves, the county adopted this shoreline setback ordinance.
How does that affect your job or your enforcement or your permitting of structures?
When you're building around the coastal area, you have to build a certain amount away from that shoreline. And that erosion data that was done scientifically with the Chip Fletcher study and in partnership with Sea Grant gave us the various coastal erosion rates around the island. And so given a particular area's coastal erosion, it will determine via this formula essentially how far you can build from that setback. Or sorry, so to say, from the shoreline. And a lot of that was determined on looking at the erosion date and multiplying it times essentially what is the lifetime of a structure, how long that structure is anticipated to be able to last. Roughly, you can say is between 70 and 100 years. And saying, when you come in to get your permits to build a house or a barn or even a fence, so to speak, it's anticipated that that structure, in order to keep it from being affected by coastal erosion processes, has to be set back a certain amount of distance based on the erosion of your seafronting property.
And so my understanding then, there's this scientific data and the Kauai County implemented it in its planning, and it's a really progressive, as you said, compared to what's happening nationally. So how do people in the community feel about that when you're talking to them about where they can build?
Overall, there's a general strong support when you talk about it in a broad sense of moving structures back from the coastal area, be it because of the need to protect from sea level rise, from coastal threats such as tsunamis, as well as those that come with strong storm type of activities. Just pushing the built environment further away from the shoreline, for the most part, people can get behind that. And they understand that and they support that. It's when you deal with it on the individual property owner level that it becomes a different issue, because this is their property and they have the constitutional right to utilize that property to their own utility. When an individual property owner comes in and realizes they're now subject to this much more progressive or robust setback, there is some pushback to a certain degree. So that we have to deal with essentially. I'm not going to say that everybody's in, a kumbaya type of moment, like, let's all move further back from the shoreline. Not at all. But there's an understanding of why we have to go through the process. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it is in the best interest of the property owner to site his or her structure in a manner that it's not going to affect coastal erosion processes, or in their own self-interest, not be affected by coastal erosion processes. Because if we allow them to go so close to the shoreline that in 15, 20, 30 years, the waves are lapping at the foundation of their house, they're looking at their home falling into the sea, that is in their best interest. Sometimes it's not necessarily seen it in the immediate situation, but overall it is.
So I understand how that works in terms of, I think, people wanting to build, but what's happening in terms of homes that are maybe already really close to the shore and they're being affected by storm events or even high tides?
For the built structures that are under threat now, that is a daily concern for the department here in the county, as well as over at the state DLNR offices. And there are a myriad of different ways in which you can attempt to at least mitigate the coastal erosion processes on these homes. The science is also telling us that in certain protection measures, they negatively impact other shorelines, such as the hardening of a shoreline. If a house is under threat, I should say, of wave action and is essentially about to fall into the sea, the standard protocol and course of action for decades before was to just build a seawall around it. And the Department of Land and Natural Resources would essentially look at that application as necessary to approve to save the structure. But what we're finding now is when these seawalls go in, they often affect the sand migration pattern, where it might result in the erosion of a beach that was previously not eroding before, just because it changes the pattern of the sand migrations. I have an array of different roles, from working with the enforcement team on enforcement of the zoning code, to working with the regulatory team, in particular with projects that go before the Planning Commission that are on a larger scale, like your resorts, your housing developments, and what have you, as well as we help with the setting of policies, be it at the plan level, say the general plan or the community plans, or at the adoption of ordinances at the county council.
For our youngsters, our keiki, who maybe want to grow up to have a role like you do, like what's sort of the education or career path that they might take?
To get into this type of role, it does require a college education. Mine was actually in markets and economics, actually, and that's how I essentially ended up here. So there is a very specific urban planning type of route you can take, which I would definitely recommend if they have a desire to go into this field. But there are other types of like environmental sciences, political science even, because at the end of the day we have to get these things passed at a political level. But just engaging and realizing those types of programs that focus on the built environment or our environment as a whole does essentially lead as a stepping stone into the career.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The University of Hawaii Sea Grant College Program, helping coastal communities of Hawaii and the Pacific through research, education, and outreach. Serving the community, from elementary to graduate students. Hawaii Sea Grant.
Exploring Our Fluid Earth is a dynamic curriculum developed by the University of Hawaii's Curriculum Research and Development Group, teaching ocean science concepts through the disciplines of physics, chemistry, biology, and ecology. Exploring Our Fluid Earth is now available freely online. Find out more at Exploring Our Fluid.
The Curriculum Research and Development Group in the College of Education at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. CRDG's training roots go back over 40 years. Through professional development programs, curriculum workshops, research on teaching methodology, individualized school and district training, and so much more. The Curriculum Research and Development Group, improving schools, improving education. CRDG.